everyone, and thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the Jam and Justice Open Evening. I'm Beth Perry, and I'm really pleased to see so many of you here tonight. It's a lovely Friday, it's a sunny day. Hopefully you've got a drink, and we really appreciate you all coming along. We want this to be a fun, relaxing way to find out about our project as a kind of first contact. You should by now hopefully have the wonderful flyer in front of you that's been designed for us by the lovely Amy Clancy. And that's going to tell you a bit about your project, but I'm going to fill in a few of the gaps for you as well. So tonight I'm going to tell you a bit about the project. Then I'm delighted that we've got Carolyn Wilkins here, the Chief Executive of Oldham Council, to tell us a little bit about how we can make devolution matter in Greater Manchester, and how the opportunity of devolution might be seized to bring about more equal outcomes in the city. I've asked her to speak about what's already happening, what needs to happen, and what role a project like this might play in achieving those outcomes. Then the rest of the Jam and Justice team will introduce themselves and say a little bit about what their roles are and what their hopes are for this project. And then, importantly, it's your turn. You've already got a drink, but we're going to have some food put on as well for you to taste. And some of you have already started playing the games and activities that we've got around. These are tasters, really, for the way in which we want to run this project, for the kinds of ways in which we want to get people involved in our research design, in helping us think through the questions, and hopefully finding some solutions as well. Then just before 7 o'clock, I'm going to ask Nicola Headland from the ESRC Urban Transformations Programme just there, to get some feedback from the activities and to say something on behalf of the programme. If you have to leave early, which we understand, obviously it's Friday, if you could let Vicky know if you've got interest in following up with us, or if you think you might like to get involved, so that we don't miss that opportunity to hear from you. If you haven't already registered also or had your free drink, then please do that when we finish with any of the formal stuff. Okay. So, Jam and Justice. Jam and Justice was born out of a shared passion from a group of academics and practitioners in the voluntary sector to move beyond critique. And so what do we mean by that? Well, first, we're not naive to the structural conditions which shape the possibilities, politics and trajectories in our city. We recognise that there are a series of issues and challenges that we face. And there are some very legitimate critiques of what's going on at the moment in urban governance. So we're not blind about any of that. But we don't want to get paralysed by it. This is, for us, quite a hopeful project. And it's part of what's being called the participatory turn in research at the moment. So we kind of position ourselves at the vanguard of some of these new ways of thinking about the relationship between universities and society, and how we can actually marry some of those really tricky demands. There's no easy answer for academically excellent work that's also societally relevant. And we want to do that in practice as well as in theory. So this is why we see the current moment as both an issue and an opportunity. And to that extent, it's not only what devolution is, but what we might be able to do with it that counts. So we are critical, but we're also hopeful that we might play a role in achieving more inclusive governance within the city region. And that's why the ESRC saw it fit to award us what's actually only one of only 4 urban transformations grants that's been funded in the UK. That's Nicola from the programme. Okay, so in talking about this project, I'm going to maybe use some terms that are slightly trickier to understand, or some terms that might be a bit jargonistic. I'll try and translate as best I can. But we're trying to leave space tonight for us to talk with each other rather than just to talk at you, and that's why most of the evening is not structured in that way. So, Jam and Justice. Jam is our metaphor. It's an easy one for inclusive governance. It actually comes from a senior official in Greater Manchester who's here today, Mark Atherton, who's the Director of Environment, who we did some previous work with. And in our work, Mark was really taken with the idea that there was so much valuable, informal and grassroots activity going on in the city region, but that it was very disconnected from formal decision making. And so after we'd worked together for a while, he said to me, you know, Beth, we need to find the jam in the sandwich between the decision makers and the 2.7 million people that make up this city region. So jam's quite a sticky metaphor, if you excuse the pun. Not everyone agrees with what jam might evoke, but it's quite a good metaphor to think with. Some people think the idea of these two slices of bread actually perpetuates the gap, the tension between a top-down and a bottom-up. It suggests there's maybe a qualitative difference or a hierarchy, that possibly just by sticking the things together you can make a better system. But other people prefer the idea of an open sandwich or a salad, or all kinds of other food-based metaphors are coming through to think about what we're actually trying to do. Other people, we didn't think of this at the time, love the idea of jam because it's about improvisation, it's about flexibility, it's a kind of musical connotation of how you sort of get along together within a given form. But what's the point of the jam? What's the purpose of inclusive governance if it doesn't achieve different outcomes? If it doesn't palpably address some of the challenges that we face, poverty, marginalisation, environmental degradation? So in our project we're suggesting that inclusive governance is necessary as a starting point, but we know it may not be enough to realise more equal outcomes in the city. So that's why our project is part of broader efforts within all our institutions and also within an international programme of work to realise just cities. So, what do we want to do? This is taken from our bid. This is probably some of the jargon you're familiar with. One of the fundamental concepts here is really around co-production. This is a concept that's really popular at the moment, increasingly in the higher education sector, but also within policy worlds and practice worlds. And of course it's not new to many community researchers who have been working like this for decades and centuries. There's a broad consensus that co-production means opening up the research process from cradle to grave, getting people involved in what we're doing, in setting the questions, in designing the project, in undertaking the research, in analysing the results, and in disseminating and then trying to achieve impact with what we've found. So the idea is that that will lead to better impact by engaging people as we go. The idea is that we can't address complex urban problems by working in knowledge silos. But co-production for us also means focusing on the human doing, the human element of the research. So the idea is that trust, reciprocity, the human connections are actually what makes co-production partnerships qualitatively different, even if the concept is not actually new. So in Jam and Justice we're going to work with this concept, we're going to test it critically, we're going to theorise it, we're going to try and scale it up from just a single individual community project, and we're going to try and do it. So that's quite a heady mix. And we hope that one of our contributions will be to test this idea that co-production in research and in policy are both needed equally to develop more inclusive governance. So, how are we going to put all of this into practice? There's 5 main elements to our project, some of which are captured in the info sheet that you've been handed out already. First, there's the project team itself. We have to hold the vision, if you like. We have to lead the co-production efforts, make sure that we contribute to the intellectual debates, as well as realise the outcomes that we want to have in society. But then there's this action research cooperative. We're going to delegate decisions, resources, responsibilities to the Action Research Cooperative, or the ARC, to help us address our aims and our research questions. We've described this in academic terms as a boundary space, but what do we really mean by that? We mean it sits between multiple sectors, between different kinds of knowledges, and that it's influenced by each partner, but doesn't solely belong to any one. So then, what's the ARC going to do? Well, it's going to co-produce 10 action research projects. And what we want these to do is to really test our ideas about inclusive governance in the city region. We've been trying really hard not to pin down exactly what these ARC projects are going to look like. We don't want to limit the imagination or possibility of the ARC when it gets set up in how they're going to commission projects or what they think might be achieved with these. So all of this is taking place in Greater Manchester as our single site, but we also want to learn from elsewhere. So we've got work at a less intensive scale going on in Scotland. We're all going to go on a field trip up to Scotland to find out how devolved governance works up there. in Chicago, in Melbourne, in Paris, Gothenburg, Kisumu in Kenya. So we also got a number of networks and activities that are going to hopefully help us achieve our impact. That includes trying to produce a forward plan, maybe a manifesto, but there's lots going on already. So a forward plan, a summary of what we found for how you might make devolution matter in Greater Manchester, and work with other organisations like the local authorities, the core sector voluntary support group, and our international partner, Mr. Urban Futures, to do that. So, what is the ARC? Well, the ARC's going to bring together 15 different practitioners, plus the Jam and Justice research team. We're looking for people who have passion, commitment to social change, continuity. It's a 30-month project. That's ideally going to require a bit of commitment, we know that. We're looking to make, we're calling it an epistemic community. Okay, so that's jargon. But what do we mean? Well, if we really believe that people's knowledge and skills are needed in different ways, in diverse mixes, in order to address some of these issues, we need to make a knowledge community. So we're calling it an epistemic community, and that helped us get the funding, let's be honest. So this is our co-production dream team. We're looking for diversity of expertise, skills and networks to help us address our core questions. And difference is good. We don't want everybody to be the same in this process. So, what are people going to have to help them do this? What does the ARC look like? Well, as I've said, you know, we're looking, it's going to be a 30-month project, so there's going to be some commitment involved in that with time and resources. But we recognise also that we want to recognise people's participation. So there's a flat fee for being involved in the ARC, there's support for doing blogging and diary keeping and help think about what the ARC is learning. But most importantly, there's this collective decision making over what these 10 ARC projects might look like. We're going to take the ARC up to Scotland to learn about what's happened with devolved governance there. And there's various other skills, networks, research methods training that will be on offer to participants in the ARC. And there are a number of things that we would like people to join us in doing. So coming to meetings, committing to the project, working with us to do data collection, analysis and dissemination, helping us work out how we deal with this ethical and complex mix of a co-production partnership, where we're trying to do the academic stuff and hopefully make a difference in the world as well. And think about how we might leverage our skills and networks and common resources to achieve more than we think we might be able to at the moment. How are we going to put all that together? Well, these are our three key principles for how we're going to try and make this ARC. The first one's mutual compatibility. So that means the ARC participants are going to have to work together to produce shared meanings, shared values and action. So diversity and difference is a strength here, but we also have to be able to get along and work together over quite a long time. So that means that over the next 6 months, we're going to be making time to work alongside participants who might want to join us. They think they might, but they're not sure. So we're trying to create opportunities in which we could test that out. And it also means getting to know us better. So we're going to have more drop-ins and social activities so that we can see how well that dream team might come together. We want people to be able to assess for themselves whether they'd be interested in joining us. So we're going to try to raise more awareness, share documents, do bite-sized bits of information on websites so that people can understand that. We're going to get out to visit places. We're going to carry on some of these mapping activities and work out who really should be around the table. Ultimately, we're going to have to select. There's only 15 people, but we're really trying to explore how we can best do that, staying true to our values and to the aims and objectives of the project. Then finally, there's this idea of incompleteness. How do you get funding for something that's certain enough to get the funding, but incomplete enough to be co-produced? That's a real challenge, but somehow we've pulled it off. What that means is that the design and operation of the ARC, we want to be genuinely affected by the participants who are in it. We've set the direction, we know that, and we've made some decisions which are going to impact on the project and how it unfolds. But we're trying to open up the research process. Not everything is set in stone. We haven't decided everything. So we think that's a really good thing, because it means there's space for people to come with their ideas and there's space for people to work with us. And we think co-production means keeping some things deliberately open. So let me give you an example. Through these ARC projects, we do have some very clear ideas of what the kinds of projects the ARC might commission could be. But this is really about the kind of principles that they would express, what they would be for. We know we want to use the ARC projects to test different ways to do governance around citizen engagement. We want to find fresh approaches to solving different problems around inclusive governance. We want to get the right kind of mix of projects in order to say something really sensible about how we can combine different factors to produce inclusive governance. So if that sounds a bit abstract, we agree. So what are we doing? Well, we're working with GMCVO, our co-investigator, to do some pilot projects to try and find out what kinds of things we should really be looking for. How can we actually define what the criteria are, the success factors, go and play Jenga if you're not sure what we're talking about, that are going to help us think through the real value of these projects. And we're doing that with GMCVO in Stockport, working with the Greater Manchester BME community and the GMCVO Ambition for Ageing. So we're also looking at other cases outside Greater Manchester and asking ourselves, well, what does this tell us about inclusive governance, or what the success or limiting factors might be? What are we going to look for in our projects? So here's Home Baked in Anfield, a community bakery and community trust. And so here, what's the jam? Well, really it's about a new local membership organisation collectively managing land and buildings. So that would suggest that a success factor to get more inclusive governance is the transfer of assets and devolving responsibility. It would suggest that there are different methods to inspire people to get involved. So here they're inviting people to bake with them, to bake your own bread. It's quite a good trick really, it's a bit like co-production. That was a way of getting people involved. Then there's something like the Map Local project. This is a smartphone app that lets people upload photos, voice tags, geocodes to say what they think matters in their area. So is inclusive governance about using digital technology to feed back to spatial master planning? Or is inclusive governance actually inherently bound with the process of doing research itself? So this is the Morris Justice Project in New York, where a community research team did hundreds of interviews. They reanalysed all the police data and looking at the tactics that were being used on poorer, disadvantaged black communities. And the research process itself is the jam here, because what they did was use community knowledge in order to try and change policy. And we think this is really interesting because it says something about that relationship between knowledge, policy and change. And that's really what we're aiming for here. This is one of our underlying ideas, that co-produced and participative knowledge processes might actually change the way urban governance works and hopefully the outcomes that are produced. So, let's bring it home. This is Greater Manchester. This is where we are. This is the context we're working in. 10 local authorities, 2.7 million people, devolution frontrunner. We've all got stories that we can tell about Greater Manchester in this room. But we're lucky actually that we don't all have to tell them. So Carolyn's going to say something about the local authorities and Oldham's experiences in relation to some of these questions. I don't know, for those of you that don't know Carolyn is the Chief Executive of Oldham City Council. She's also leading on the Inclusive Growth theme and on the Greater Manchester Leadership Framework programme. And Carolyn, I hope you don't mind me saying, you also represent the kind of, maybe a new breed of practitioner as well, who's got a PhD, who knows the kind of world we're working in. And so your PhD focused on organisational trust and control in organisations at times of significant change. So without any further ado, I'll ask you to come and say something up here.